I still remember the moment my world shifted. There I was, sitting in the back row of the Global Aerospace Innovation Expo, watching Carter Vance stride across the stage like he owned the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present Hälvix Dynamics' revolutionary self-correcting microneural processor, he announced to thunderous applause. The crowd of investors, engineers, and journalists hung on his every word. My heart pounded in my chest. For 30 years, I'd worked quietly in the shadows at Hälvix. At 62, I thought I'd seen everything. But watching Carter claim credit for my aerospace chip felt like a punch to the gut. 3 years of sleepless nights, countless failed prototypes, and breakthrough moments in my basement workshop, all erased with his smooth presentation. The irony wasn't lost on me. This chip could revolutionize space navigation, helping rockets self-correct their paths in real time. NASA, SpaceX, and agencies worldwide were already calling. Carter had just become the golden boy of aerospace technology. But as I sat there, forcing myself to stay calm, I couldn't help but smile slightly. Carter had no idea what he'd just stepped into. Let me take you back 3 years earlier, to where this all began. My late wife Sarah always said I did my best thinking at 3 a.m., and she wasn't wrong. It was during one of those quiet midnight hours in my basement workshop that everything clicked. I'd been struggling with a navigation problem that had stumped aerospace engineers for decades. How do you create a processor that can instantly adapt to unexpected changes in space? Solar winds, gravitational anomalies, equipment failures, space is unpredictable. That night, I was tinkering with neural network algorithms when inspiration struck. What if the chip could learn and self-correct like a human brain? I sketched frantically, my coffee growing cold as ideas poured onto paper. The breakthrough came when I realized the processor needed 2 layers, one for standard navigation and another for emergency adaptation. It was elegant, simple, and revolutionary. I spent the next 18 months perfecting the design in my personal workshop. I documented everything meticulously, timestamps, video logs, sketches. Sarah had taught me to be thorough before she passed away 2 years ago. Details matter, Walt, she'd always say. By the time I brought the prototype to Hälvix, I already had a working model. Carter Vance arrived at Hälvix 18 months ago like a whirlwind of corporate buzzwords and flashy presentations. At 47, he was everything I wasn't: charismatic, loud, and obsessed with his image. The board hired him to modernize our company culture. I should have seen the warning signs. Carter immediately started taking credit for projects he barely understood. He'd swoop into meetings, listen for 10 minutes, then present our work as his vision. The younger engineers loved his energy. When I first showed him my chip design, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is exactly what Hälvix needs to dominate the aerospace market," he said, slapping my back too hard. "Great work. Team effort." Team effort? I'd built this alone in my basement for 3 years. Within weeks, Carter was scheduling investor calls about his revolutionary navigation system. He spoke about the chip like he'd birthed it himself, using technical terms he clearly didn't understand. When reporters asked detailed questions, he'd deflect to his talented engineering team. I tried speaking up once during a board meeting. Carter smiled and said, "Walt's being modest. He helped with some of the implementation." But I stayed quiet. Little did Carter know I'd been preparing for this moment my entire career. 3 weeks after the expo, Carter called me into his corner office. The walls were covered with awards he'd earned in his 18 months at Hälvix. My chip prototype sat on his desk like a trophy. "Walt, I've got some exciting news," he said, not bothering to look up from his phone. "The board has approved your early retirement package, effective immediately." I blinked, letting his words sink in. "Effective immediately?" "Don't worry, we're taking care of you," Carter continued, sliding a thick document across his desk. "Generous severance, full benefits, and a consulting title. You'll be our senior technical advisor." I flipped through the pages, my lawyer daughter's voice echoing in my head about reading everything carefully. Buried in the legal jargon was a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I couldn't discuss my work on the chip publicly or claim any credit for its development. Of course, there's a small confidentiality clause. Carter said casually, "Standard stuff. Protects the company's intellectual property interests." Intellectual property. My property. I looked at him sitting behind his massive desk, already planning his next media appearance. He had no idea that I'd anticipated this moment. "I'll need some time to review this," I said quietly. Carter's smile faltered slightly. "Sign it, Walt. It's a good deal." That evening, I drove across town to visit my daughter Emma's law office. She inherited her mother's sharp mind and my stubborn streak, a dangerous combination for anyone trying to pull a fast one on the Hennings family. Emma read through Carter's contract with focused intensity. Her office walls were lined with legal books and a photo of her with Sarah at her law school graduation. "Dad, this NDA is ironclad," Emma said, setting down the papers. "If you sign this, you legally can't claim credit for your work." "I figured as much," I replied. "That's why I need to tell you something." Emma raised an eyebrow, the same way Sarah used to when she sensed I was up to something. 3 years ago, when I first started developing the chip, I registered the original prototype under my private LLC, I explained. Hennings Aerospace Solutions. "Remember when you helped me set that up?" Her eyes widened. "Dad, you didn't." "I did. Every breakthrough, every iteration, every major development happened in my basement workshop, using my personal resources. The chip Carter's claiming as Halvik's property? It's legally mine." Emma leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "They missed it during their legal review?" "Completely. Carter's team was so focused on the final product, they never traced the development timeline. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing my documentation. Everything was airtight. The next morning, I signed Carter's agreement." He practically glowed with satisfaction as I handed over the papers, probably thinking he'd neutralized any potential threat from the old engineer. What Carter didn't know was that I'd built 2 versions of the chip. The one he had was functional. It would work perfectly for standard navigation tasks. But the second chip, locked away in my home workshop, contained the real innovation. The advanced version had what I called adaptive learning protocols. While Carter's chip could handle basic self-correction, mine could evolve, literally rewriting its own code based on mission requirements. It was the difference between a smart calculator and artificial intelligence. I'd spent months perfecting this second chip after bringing the first prototype to Halvik's. Call it an insurance policy. Sarah always said I was paranoid about protecting my work. That afternoon, I cleaned out my office while Carter was in another investor meeting. 30 years of memories fit into 3 cardboard boxes. Photos with my team, awards for innovation, the coffee mug Sarah bought me. As I walked to my car, I passed the conference room where Carter was presenting to potential buyers. Through the glass, I could see him gesturing enthusiastically at slides featuring my chip's technical specifications. "The applications are limitless," his voice carried into the hallway. "Deep space missions, Mars colonization, asteroid mining operations." He was right about the applications. He just had no idea how much more powerful the technology could become. 2 weeks into my retirement, I received an unexpected call from Maya Patel, a young engineer who'd interned under my mentorship 3 summers ago. Maya was brilliant, the kind of fresh-thinking problem solver our industry desperately needed. "Mr. Hennings, I heard about your retirement," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I need to tell you something about what's happening at Halvik's." We met at a small cafe near her apartment. Maya looked exhausted, her usual bright energy dimmed by stress. "Carter shut down the internship program," she explained. "He said it was cost ineffective. All the mentorship initiatives you built over 20 years, gone." My heart sank. That program had launched dozens of engineering careers, including Maya's. "But that's not why I called," Maya continued. She pulled out a worn notebook I recognized immediately. "Remember this? The sketches and calculations you shared during my internship?" I nodded. During Maya's final week, I'd given her a copy of my early chip designs, theoretical work I'd done years before the breakthrough. At the time, it was just educational material. "These drawings are dated 2 years before Carter even arrived at Halvik's," Maya said, opening to pages covered with my handwriting. "Some of these concepts appear in the current chip design." I studied the notebook, recognizing my own thought process evolving on paper. "Maya," I said quietly, "would you be willing to make a sworn statement about when you received this notebook?" Her determined nod reminded me why I'd believed in her potential from day one. The tech world moves fast, but sometimes the right story finds exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. 3 weeks after my coffee with Maya, an interesting article appeared on Tech Truth, a respected industry blog known for exposing corporate misconduct. The headline read, "Aerospace Breakthrough or Brilliant Theft? Anonymous Source Reveals Troubling Timeline." The article didn't mention me by name, but it raised pointed questions about Hälviks's navigation chip development. Most damaging was a series of time-stamped photos showing someone working on processor prototypes in what appeared to be a private workshop. The photos were taken from security footage in my basement, motion-activated cameras I'd installed years ago to document my work process. The timestamps clearly showed chip development happening months before Carter joined Hälviks. The blogger had done their homework. They'd cross-referenced patent filings, corporate announcements, and employment records. The timeline didn't add up if Carter was truly the chip's creator. Sources close to the project suggest the real innovator may have been forced into silence, the article concluded. In an industry built on intellectual honesty, these questions demand answers. Within hours, the story was trending across social media. Engineering forums exploded with discussions about corporate credit theft. Carter's response was swift and predictable. Hälviks issued a statement calling the allegations baseless conspiracy theories from disgruntled former employees. But the damage was done. People were asking questions. 2 months later, I got a call that changed everything. Dr. Susan Chen from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was on the line, and she sounded puzzled. "Mr. Hennings, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly," she said. "I got your number from Maya Patel. We've been testing Hälviks's navigation chip for a potential Mars mission, and we're seeing some unusual behavior." I set down my coffee, suddenly very interested. "What kind of behavior?" "Performance degradation. The chip works perfectly for about 3 months. Then efficiency starts dropping. It's subtle, maybe 5% initially, but it compounds over time. For a Mars mission, that could be catastrophic." My heart raced. The degradation wasn't a bug, it was a feature. I'd built in what I called a maintenance protocol, a subtle reminder that the technology required ongoing support from its creator. "Dr. Chen, have you tried running a full diagnostic on the core algorithms?" "We have, but honestly, the code is so complex that only the original programmer could fully understand it. Carter Vance claims his team can handle it, but they keep requesting more time." I paused, choosing my words carefully. What if I told you the original programmer might be willing to help? There was silence on the line. Then, "Mr. Hennings, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes the most important innovations happen in basement workshops, not corporate boardrooms." Dr. Chen's next words sent electricity through my bones. "Would you be available for a consultation? This is a matter of national importance." That afternoon, I called Emma. "Honey, I think it's time to make our move." The patent challenge I filed the next week was meticulous, methodical, and absolutely devastating. Emma had helped me prepare every document, cross-reference every claim, and build an ironclad case. The retroactive patent application included 3 years of time-stamped video evidence, purchase receipts for every component, detailed lab notes, and sworn testimony from Maya about the notebook timeline. Most importantly, it included technical specifications for features that didn't exist in Carter's version. The legal filing triggered an automatic review process that would freeze any new contracts using the disputed technology. Suddenly, Hälviks couldn't sell licenses to their revolutionary chip until the ownership question was resolved. Carter's response was immediate and furious. He called a press conference that same afternoon, standing behind a podium with Hälviks Dynamics emblazoned across the front. "These baseless allegations are nothing more than a desperate attempt by a disgruntled former employee to claim credit for our company's innovations," he declared, his usual smooth demeanor cracking slightly. "Walter Hennings was part of our team, but this chip represents years of collaborative effort by dozens of engineers." Dozens of engineers? I'd worked alone in my basement for 3 years. But Carter was doubling down on his lie, hoping his charm could overcome evidence. The patent office assigned the case to arbitration, a process that would examine all evidence and determine true ownership. The arbitrator was Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a respected former aerospace engineer turned intellectual property specialist. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Truth has a way of surfacing, especially when it's properly documented. The cracks in Carter's story began showing within days of the patent challenge. Janet Williams, Halvix's longtime chief technology officer, submitted her resignation with a statement that sent shockwaves through the industry. After 35 years in aerospace engineering, I cannot remain silent while intellectual theft is disguised as innovation. Janet wrote in her public resignation letter, Walter Hennings is the true creator of our navigation technology, and I have emails proving Carter Vance knew this from the beginning. Janet had been at Halvix since before I arrived. She was respected throughout the industry for her technical expertise and unwavering ethics. Her statement carried enormous weight. The emails she released were damning. Internal messages between Carter and his assistant discussed managing Walt's ego and ensuring he doesn't become a problem after retirement. One particularly explosive email from Carter read, "Make sure the old man understands this is bigger than any individual contributor." Another email chain showed Carter instructing his legal team to lock down all intellectual property claims and eliminate any ambiguity about ownership. He'd known exactly what he was doing. Janet's resignation triggered something Carter hadn't anticipated: an internal revolt. Engineers who'd watched my forced retirement with quiet unease suddenly found their voices. An anonymous group calling themselves Halvix Truth Engineers began leaking additional documents. The leaked materials included meeting transcripts, where Carter dismissed my contributions and development timelines that clearly showed the chip's creation predated his arrival. Carter tried to contain the damage, but in the social media age, truth spreads faster than corporate spin. Justice for Walt began trending on engineering Twitter. Carter's problems multiplied when Fusion Aerospace, Halvix's biggest competitor, approached me with an interesting proposition. CEO Jennifer Walsh called personally to offer a consulting contract worth more than my annual Halvix salary. "Walt, we've been following this situation closely," Jennifer said during our phone call. "Your reputation in this industry is impeccable. We'd be honored to have you lead our navigation systems division." The offer was tempting. Validation from industry peers, a chance to build something new, and definitely more money than my fixed retirement income. But money had never been my motivation. "I appreciate the offer, Jennifer, but I need to decline," I said. "This isn't about finding a new job. It's about truth." Jennifer paused. "I respect that, Walt. But if you change your mind, our door is always open. What's happening to you is wrong, and everyone in this industry knows it." That afternoon, I received similar calls from 3 other aerospace companies. Word was spreading that Walter Hennings was available, and apparently, my reputation had survived Carter's character assassination attempts. But I had bigger plans than jumping to another corporation. Sarah always said I was meant to teach, not just engineer. Maybe it was time to return to my roots. The university where I'd earned my engineering degree 40 years ago had been asking me to give guest lectures for years. I'd always been too busy with Halvix projects. Now I had something important to say about innovation, ethics, and the courage to stand up for truth. I called Professor Martinez and accepted her standing invitation. "Walt, we'd be honored to have you speak," she said. "What topic did you have in mind?" "Ethics and innovation," I replied, "and why staying quiet about injustice serves no one." Meanwhile, Halvix's stock price began a steady decline. Investors don't like uncertainty, and the patent dispute had created exactly that. Every news article about the ownership controversy knocked another few points off their market value. Carter scheduled emergency investor calls, trying to reassure shareholders that the company's technology portfolio remained secure. But his explanations grew increasingly desperate and contradictory. During one particularly disastrous call, an investor asked about the specific technical details of the navigation chip. Carter stumbled through buzzwords and generic engineering terms, clearly out of his depth. "Can you explain how the adaptive correction algorithms work?" the investor pressed. Carter's response was painful to listen to. "Well, it's a very complex system that utilizes advanced computational matrices to optimize navigational parameters in real-time scenarios." That's not how my chip worked at all. Any engineer listening would recognize the nonsense immediately. The same day, another damaging story broke. Carter's estranged wife, Linda, filed for divorce and included some interesting documents in her court filings. Among them were internal Halvix memos showing Carter knew about my work timeline before making his public claims. One memo, written by Carter himself, read, "Hennings' basement project has commercial potential. Legal is reviewing how to integrate it into our portfolio." Basement project. He'd known all along that I'd developed the technology independently. His public statements about collaborative team effort were deliberate lies. The divorce filing became public record, and investigative journalists immediately seized on the memos. Carter's narrative was falling apart in real time. That evening, I received a text from Maya. "Mr. Hennings, everyone at Halvix is talking about the memos. People are angry. Carter lied to all of us." Change was coming, and Carter's house of cards was starting to collapse. The call I'd been expecting finally came on a Thursday morning. Special Agent Michael Torres from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division wanted to discuss potential securities fraud related to Halvix's public statements about their technology portfolio. "Mr. Hennings, we're investigating whether false claims about intellectual property ownership were used to mislead investors," Agent Torres explained. "Would you be willing to provide a statement?" I agreed to meet the following week. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting other engineers from similar theft and ensuring investors had accurate information. The timing couldn't have been worse for Carter. That same day, his executive assistant, Rachel, contacted the FBI through her lawyer. Rachel had kept meticulous records of Carter's communications, including instructions to delete certain emails and backdate documents. According to sources, Rachel had finally reached her breaking point when Carter asked her to lie to federal investigators. She'd worked in corporate environments for 15 years and knew when she was being asked to cross legal lines. Rachel's cooperation gave investigators access to Carter's deleted communications, including messages coordinating the cover-up of my original development work. The digital trail was extensive and damaging. Carter hired a high-powered criminal defense attorney, which only made the situation look worse. Local news picked up the story. AEROSPACE CEO under federal investigation for alleged technology theft. The university lecture I'd scheduled for the following month suddenly seemed very timely. Students needed to understand that innovation requires integrity. "Dad," Emma said during our weekly dinner, "I think you're about to become famous for all the right reasons." The Halvix board of directors finally acted decisively. Carter was removed as CEO pending resolution of ongoing legal matters, replaced by interim CEO Janet Williams, who'd returned specifically to clean up the mess. Carter's farewell message to employees was brief and bitter. "I'm confident these baseless allegations will be proven false. Halvix's technological achievements speak for themselves." But Halvix's technological achievements were largely my achievements, and everyone knew it now. Janet's first act as interim CEO was issuing a public statement acknowledging my role in developing the navigation chip. Walter Hennings is a respected engineer whose contributions to aerospace technology span decades. We are committed to ensuring proper recognition for all innovations developed by our team members. It was corporate speak, but it represented a fundamental shift. Janet was positioning Halvix to settle rather than fight, probably hoping to minimize damage to their reputation. Carter's response was predictably self-serving. He claimed ignorance about the chip's true origins, blaming his legal team for not properly vetting ownership claims. "I relied on my advisors to ensure all intellectual property was properly attributed," he said in a statement. But the internal memos released during his divorce proceedings told a different story. Carter had known exactly what he was doing. The arbitration hearing was scheduled for the following month. Dr. Rodriguez would review all evidence and make a binding determination about patent ownership. Maya called that evening with news from inside Halvix. "Mr. Hennings, morale is actually improving. People are excited that Janet's back in charge, and everyone's talking about your upcoming university lecture." Change was happening faster than I'd anticipated. The arbitration decision came down on a crisp October morning. Dr. Rodriguez had spent 6 weeks reviewing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and examining technical documentation. Her 43-page ruling was thorough, detailed, and unambiguous. Based on comprehensive review of time-stamped evidence, witness testimony, and technical analysis, this arbitrator finds that Walter Hennings is the original and rightful inventor of the aerospace navigation technology in question. I was awarded full patent rights, plus damages for lost licensing revenue. The compensation was substantial, enough to fund the next phase of my plans. But more important than money was vindication. The ruling stated clearly that my innovation had been misappropriated through deliberate corporate malfeasance, and that Carter's claims represented a clear violation of intellectual property law. The aerospace industry took notice immediately. Within hours of the ruling, I received congratulatory calls from engineers across the country. Professional organizations that had honored Carter began quietly rescinding awards and recognition. My first decision was characteristic of everything Sarah had taught me about success. I immediately licensed the technology to NASA and 3 nonprofit space research organizations at cost. Profit had never been my motivation. Advancing human knowledge was. For commercial applications, I established reasonable licensing fees that would fund educational initiatives. Maya would help administer a scholarship program for engineering students from underserved communities. Carter issued a bitter statement claiming the arbitration process was biased against business innovation. He announced plans to appeal, but his legal options were limited. That evening, Emma and I celebrated quietly with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. Sarah had been saving for a special occasion. It felt like the right moment to open it. Within weeks of the arbitration ruling, an interesting opportunity emerged. 3 of my former interns, Maya, David Chen, and Sofia Rodriguez, approached me about starting a new company focused on ethical aerospace innovation. Mr. Hennings, we've been talking about this for months, Maya explained during our meeting. There's room in this industry for a company that puts innovation before ego. The concept was appealing, a worker-owned cooperative where engineers retained rights to their innovations while collaborating on larger projects. We'd focus on sustainable aerospace technology and open-source development for educational institutions. We've already secured initial funding from 3 impact investors, David added. They're specifically interested in supporting ethical technology development. I thought about Sarah, who'd always believed that the best success comes from lifting others up. This felt like the right next chapter. I'm in, I said, but on one condition. We establish clear policies protecting individual intellectual property from day one. No one should experience what I went through. We incorporated as Stellar Solutions Cooperative the following month. Our mission statement emphasized collaborative innovation, transparent ownership, and advancing aerospace technology for humanity's benefit rather than corporate profit. The industry response was immediate and positive. Experienced engineers tired of corporate politics began inquiring about positions. Recent graduates excited by our cooperative model submitted applications. Even some former Halvix employees reached out, including several engineers who'd been frustrated by Carter's leadership style. Within 6 months, we had 12 employees and contracts with 2 small satellite companies. We were starting small, but we were starting right. My university lecture was scheduled for November, and I spent weeks preparing. The topic had evolved beyond ethics and innovation to encompass resilience, documentation, and the courage to stand up for truth even when it's uncomfortable. The Quiet Revolution, How Individual Integrity Shapes Technological Progress, would be delivered to an audience of engineering students, faculty, and industry professionals. Word had spread beyond the university. The lecture hall was packed, with overflow seating in adjacent rooms connected by video link. Maya had helped promote the event through social media. I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of eager faces. Many were young engineers just starting their careers. Others were seasoned professionals who'd fought similar battles. Innovation requires courage, I began, not just the courage to explore new ideas, but the courage to protect those ideas when others try to steal them. I told my story chronologically, from the 3 a.m. basement breakthroughs to the arbitration victory. I emphasized the importance of documentation, the value of mentorship, and the responsibility we all have to speak truth in our professional lives. The question and answer session lasted longer than the lecture itself. Students wanted to know about navigating corporate politics, protecting intellectual property, and finding the balance between collaboration and self-protection. One question particularly resonated. How do you forgive someone who stole years of your work? I thought about Carter, probably plotting his next move somewhere. Forgiveness isn't about them, I replied. It's about freeing yourself to focus on what comes next. The lecture was recorded and posted online, where it quickly went viral in engineering circles. A month after my lecture, something unexpected happened. A documentary filmmaker named Rebecca Martinez reached out about creating a feature-length film about corporate intellectual property theft in the technology industry. Your story represents a broader problem, Rebecca explained during our initial phone call. Engineers and inventors are systematically exploited by corporations that prioritize image over innovation. The documentary project, tentatively titled The Quiet Inventor, would examine my case, alongside similar stories from other industries. Rebecca had already interviewed software developers, medical device inventors, and renewable energy researchers who'd faced comparable challenges. What makes your story compelling is the outcome, Rebecca continued. Most people in your situation never get justice. You fought back and won. I agreed to participate, with one condition. Any proceeds from the documentary would fund engineering scholarships through the Stellar Solutions Foundation we were establishing. Filming took place over several months. Rebecca interviewed me extensively, but also spoke with Maya, Janet Williams, Dr. Chen from NASA, and even some current Halvix employees who'd witnessed Carter's behavior firsthand. The most powerful interview was with Sarah's sister Margaret, who spoke about my late wife's influence on my approach to innovation and ethics. Sarah always said Walt's greatest strength was his patience, Margaret told the camera. Carter declined to be interviewed, but Rebecca included clips from his public statements that clearly contradicted the timeline evidence. The documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was later picked up by a major streaming platform. Reviews praised its detailed examination of corporate ethics and inspiring portrait of quiet determination. The National Science Foundation nominated me for the National Medal of Science in recognition of groundbreaking innovations in aerospace navigation technology and commitment to ethical technology development. I was invited to Washington, D.C. for the award ceremony held in the White House East Room. As I stood waiting to receive the medal from the president, I touched the locket containing Sarah's photo. "This is for both of us," I whispered. The president's remarks focused on supporting individual innovators who drive technological progress. She mentioned my case as an example of perseverance triumphing over corporate malfeasance. But for me, the most meaningful moment came during the reception when a young engineering student approached nervously. "Mr. Hennings, could I ask you about adaptive algorithms?" We spent 20 minutes discussing technical details, her enthusiasm reminding me why I'd fallen in love with engineering. Teaching the next generation felt more important than any award. That night, I called Emma. "Your mother would have loved this." "Dad," she replied, "she's the reason you never gave up." 6 months later, Carter Vance wanted to meet privately to discuss resolution of our professional differences. His lawyer contacted Emma, proposing a confidential meeting. Carter apparently wanted to make some form of personal apology. I almost declined immediately, but Emma convinced me to consider it. Sometimes closure requires facing the person who wronged you. We met at a small cafe downtown. Carter looked older, grayer, diminished by the events of the past year. "Walt, I never intended for things to go this far," he began, his former confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. I listened as he offered what sounded like a prepared statement about misunderstandings and communication failures. He carefully avoided accepting responsibility for deliberately stealing my work. "I'd like to find a way to move past this," Carter concluded. I sipped my coffee, studying the man who'd stolen my life's work. He was asking for redemption without admitting guilt. "Carter," I said finally, "you had a choice. You chose to lie. That's not a misunderstanding. It's a character flaw." I stood up, leaving money for my coffee. I've moved past this. I suggest you do the same. He never contacted me again. A year after the arbitration victory, I made a surprising decision. I offered to license my navigation technology to Halifax under specific ethical terms. Janet Williams was intrigued but cautious. Walt, given everything that happened, why would you want to work with us again? Because Halifax has good engineers who deserve to work with the best technology available, I replied. The licensing agreement was unique. Halifax could use my patents for a reasonable fee, but they had to establish clear intellectual property protection policies and publicly acknowledge the true origins of the navigation technology. Janet accepted immediately. Walt, this is incredibly generous. The licensing fees would fund expanded scholarship programs through Stellar Solutions Foundation. We were now supporting 30 engineering students annually. The public announcement sent a positive message throughout the industry. Innovation and ethics could coexist profitably. Several tech publications wrote about the Hennings model of ethical licensing, suggesting it could become a template for protecting individual inventors. Carter had quietly left the aerospace industry entirely. Last I heard, he was working in real estate in another state. 5 years after Carter's betrayal, I found myself in my apple orchard in Virginia, teaching my granddaughter Lucy how to graft branches. "Grandpa Walt, why do we connect different trees together?" she asked. "Because sometimes the best fruit comes from combining old roots with new growth," I explained. That morning, I'd received news that made me smile. SpaceX had launched their Mars mission using navigation systems based on my chip technology. My initials WH were engraved deep inside the processor, a quiet signature traveling millions of miles through space. "Grandpa, are you famous?" Lucy asked. I thought about that question. My documentary had won an Emmy. My chip was guiding spacecraft to other planets. But sitting here in my orchard, teaching my granddaughter about patient growth, fame seemed less important than legacy. "Lucy, being famous isn't the goal," I said. "Being useful is." That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Walt, our scholarship recipients just got NASA internships. Your orchard is growing engineers too." I smiled, thinking of Sarah. The quiet revolution continues, one careful graft at a time.